you have your own sales data. So we know what is happening oftentimes, but we don't know why it is happening. And that's true for the years where we're experiencing growth, and it's true for the years where we're not quite able to meet that level that we had the year before. And that's really when the why comes in, and it really helps us understand what is happening. And so if you look over the last couple of years, for instance, one of the big differences is that we're seeing growth in areas like organic and grass-fed. And yes, there's more of that product out in the marketplace. We're doing a better job as an industry to talk about where the food came from, giving transparency in how the animal was raised. But still, it leaves that question of where is some of that demand shift coming from?
Hello, me folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. My name is Francisco Najar. I'm your host today. We're missing Dr. Phil Bass. He's been so busy, and I just came back from Mexico with a big show that we had that it's held every 2 years. But I'm back. I'm back at in the U.S. I'm really happy to see everyone in the office, and we have been scheduling and trying to get this interview for a little over 2 weeks, and I'm very glad that we continue. This is going to be the second episode with a woman in the meat industry, WMIN. Correct, Katie?
Correct.
Welcome back. I think that this is. I'm excited about this interview today.
I am too. I am very, very excited to welcome our guest today. And I am here on behalf of WMIN, which was a group that was formed by a group of very strong female leaders in the meat and poultry industry. They are so passionate about education, development, promoting women. And I wanted to take a moment to recognize them as well as our sponsors. We are incredibly grateful for the continued support and the collaboration that they have for the advancement of women within the meat industry. And without further ado, I am so thrilled to welcome Anne-Marie Roerink to the show. Anne-Marie is a powerhouse behind 210 Analytics, a company revolutionizing the way we understand the ever-changing world of food retail. With more than 2 decades of experience, she's a trailblazer in market research, blending her sharp insight with deep industry knowledge to decode the grocery shopper's mind and drive actionable solutions. And from the groundbreaking power of MeatsPad, which is now celebrating its 20th year anniversary with Anne-Marie at the helm, to trend-focused benchmarking reports, Anne-Marie has her finger on the pulse of everything from meat to snacks to bakery and seafood. And whether it's through innovative focus groups, sensory research, or detailed data analytics, her work fuels growth across America's biggest retail chains, manufacturers, and even single-store supermarkets. From once leading as the head of research at FMI or the Food Marketing Institute to founding her own business, Anne-Marie has truly become a trailblazer in food retail insights. And she is here today to share with us her expertise, stories, and valuable insights. We'll dive into her career and lessons she's learned along the way. And welcome, Anne-Marie.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie. That's quite the intro. I'm very flattered to be here, very excited to be here. And I am ready for question number 1 when you are.
Well, I really want to ask, that was one impressive introduction, but I really want to know, who is Anne-Marie outside of this professional role that we always hear so much about? And what do you like to do outside of your work with 210 Analytics?
All right. So as you might guess, when you run your own company and you're very passionate about what you do, I mean, I've always loved research, and I truly get to enjoy what I do every single day. Yeah, my days tend to be quite long, especially this time of year as we move from releasing research on candy and produce to meat and bakery. So the days can get long, but certainly there is a lot of family time in there as well. I have 2 kids, they're 11 and 12. And as that goes, one is in soccer, the other is in swimming. So I spend lots of weekends either by the soccer sidelines or by the side of the pool, running them around. I also love to craft a lot of times with the kids. And just really having a lot of balance in my life. Just by the nature of this podcast and the conversation that we're having, I get asked a lot. I travel a lot as a woman, and it's hard to be away from home sometimes. And I certainly struggled with that in the beginning. I remember when the kids were real little, I felt the need to cook every single meal before I left. And then I'd come home, find some of the meals still in the fridge, and I'd be frustrated. And then, after a little while, you're like, you know what? If they have McDonald's a few days in a row, because it's a lot of work with trying to manage all that, then so be it. And over time I've really started to focus on the quality of the time, especially during those times when the quantity is a little bit less than I wish.
Nice. I was um, looking at the internet and some of your LinkedIn profile, and there's a lot of fascinating data that you have like gathered, processed, analyzed, and I think I like to focus a little bit on the obviously on the meat and poultry side. But can you? I mean, I was actually looking at some videos and some information on the power of meat, fun facts or facts, and I think it's a good to kind of begin to what are some of the most impactful data that you gathered last year? I mean, it can be a, at the retail level or processing level, but I think I would like to know more about all that. I was looking at some of the data you mentioned about consumer-based data.
Yeah. I think most companies, whether you are a grocery store or you're a packer, processor, wholesaler, supplier, you have your own sales data. And oftentimes we subscribe to other sales data. So we know what is happening oftentimes, but we don't know why it is happening. And that's true for the years where we're experiencing growth. And it's true for the years where we're not quite able to meet that level that we had the year before. And that's really when the why comes in, and it really helps us understand what is happening. And so if you look over the last couple of years, for instance, one of the big differences is that we're seeing growth in areas like organic and grass-fed. And yes, there's more of that product out in the marketplace. We're doing a better job as an industry to talk about where the food came from, giving transparency in how the animal was raised. But still, it leaves that question of where is some of that demand shift coming from? And that's really where a lot of the consumer research comes in, where we talk to consumers in any which way. We do one-on-one interviews, we do shop-alongs, and also, of course, the power of meat. Katie, you mentioned it, a 20-year trend line of trying to understand what is behind the rise and fall of certain proteins of the department altogether, but also the shift between the meat department, the deli department, the frozen meat offering. And that's where a lot of that information comes from. Now, I'll give a little hint as to what we're finding here in year 20, and that is we've talked about millennials for quite a few years. And in fact, there were some years where it felt like every conference I was going to, millennials were part of every session and every keynote. And then we get kind of sick and tired of it. We moved on. Well, it turns out that this year, if you look at the growth in the meat department, more than 60% of the growth was driven by millennials. And if you think about that for a moment, boomers continue to be the largest spending generation, but the growth is coming from millennials. So that means that meat department is going to have to look a lot different in the years going forward than the last 30 years when we catered to the boomer generation. So all of a sudden, it brings into the forefront convenience, sustainability, the right portion sizes, the right packaging, global cuisine flavors, all these different things that are vastly different in the mind of the millennial than that of the boomer.
And it's funny because I got the opportunity to be stranded with Dr. Temple Granding maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we were talking, and that was one of the questions on how are we gonna make more aware those millennials, like in everything, right? Sustainability, animal welfare, like we're doing our best to produce the best quality meat, and to produce the best quality meat, it goes back to animal welfare too. And it's funny that you mentioned, because that goes back to some of the concerns that we have as an industry.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Millennials do have a much higher care factor about animal welfare. And in fairness to boomer generations, it's not like they don't care. There just is a higher trust level that ranchers and farmers care about their animals. They care about the land, and they just don't really see that there is a problem there. Then you fast forward to some of the younger generations in a marketplace who grew up with phones in their hands, who have seen all sorts of documentaries and have read all sorts of exposés about the various things that may or may not happen in the meat industry. And that's really where we truly do need to raise our voice as the meat industry, to say, hey, look, if you want to buy organic, grass-fed, etc., absolutely, but don't feel like you need to do that because the other meat isn't good, or the other meat wasn't raised with the right animal welfare, etc. And that's, I think, such a big message for us as a meat industry, that all meat is safe, nutritious, delicious, and raised sustainably and humanely. And giving that permissibility is incredibly important for all generations to be as engaged with meat as the boomers have for the last 30 years.
That is truly fascinating. And I myself am a millennial, although I'm a little bit of an atypical one just because I grew up in the food and meat industry, and my buying habits probably aren't the most reflective of the ones that are in your reports. But speaking of just history, and you mentioned that you have a lot of historical information and data over time, I would like to know more about how the power of meat has evolved and changed over time. And if you could just tell us a little bit more about what that report is, maybe for people that aren't aware or don't know what it looked like. And I mean, 20 years is a long time. When you guys set out to do that, was that always the expectation? Did you expect it to grow and blossom into what it is today? I'm very curious about the history and how it all got started.
Sure. So for those of you unaware of the power of meat, it is a study put out by the Meat Institute and Food Marketing Institute for the annual meat conference every single year. 20 years ago, the meeting planner for the Meat Institute came walking into my office and said, hey, as a conference, we're constantly spending on research, and we're doing focus groups, or we're doing this, that, and the other, but it's always one-offs, and it's very hard to just really learn something from just a point in time study. Do you think you can design something where we're starting to understand the trends and how demand is changing and how different trends are evolving? And that's where the power of meat came from. So initially we were playing around with a pleased to meet you title. So very happy that that one didn't stick. But I do vividly remember year one, the room was set up in round tables. We had maybe 300-400 people sitting in the audience. And as time went by, that session just got bigger and bigger. And then one year we went virtual, and the power of meat crashed the internet. There were so many thousands of people trying to log into that portal to listen to the power of meat virtual. It was probably 22 that the whole portal crashed. And then these days we have more than 2,000 people sitting in the power of meat session. And so, no, we had no idea, but I really think it is the industry that is driving this. I always say the power of meat is developed for the industry, by the industry. Every single day I talk to packer processors, retailers, wholesalers, suppliers, and they give me a little piece of information, and all that goes into the report. I get pictures sent to me from all over the world. I get articles that I need to be aware of. And it's really the industry understanding what this research does for the rest of the industry that has driven just this powerhouse piece of information that has become really the guiding light for many in the industry.
I'm so excited about this, and I think I resonate with a lot that you just mentioned. And I have one question, because I can see like in a lot of the people that are on the podcast is because they have a multidisciplinary profile, and I think you're right on that with a lot of things you're doing. You're looking at research, data, consumer, so you had to understand the whole supply chain. And I guess if we can just talk briefly about some of the secrets that you have to just connect those bridges between the research and communicate that to the industry so that it's also relevant at a consumer level, which in my mind I think it's one of the most difficult things to do, because it's good, it's easy to understand one, or not so easy, but it's easy to understand um one variable in the formula, but understanding the whole, how everything rolls, I think it's unique.
It is, and to me, what it all boils down to is you have to have a constant curiosity. And a number is never a number, it's never an end destination. You've got to keep digging. And sometimes you're seeing a spike in, let's just say, organic chicken or antibiotic free, or just seeing one region be bigger than another. But you always have to dig as to the why, because sometimes it is distribution driven growth. In other words, it wasn't necessarily that all of a sudden a lot of people started to buy a certain type of meat or a certain attribute, but it was really a big retailer making a shift. Well, that's an important distinction, because then the growth is driven because of what is available in the marketplace. And we've had so many changes over the last 5 years where we're constantly using the word unprecedented, but rather than getting tired of that word, it is simply the right word to use. We went through a big recession. We had good economic years. We went through the pandemic, and that completely changed how people interacted with food at home versus restaurants. And to your point, it is all connected, because there was a certain balance in the meat supply chain between retail and food service. Well, COVID completely disrupted that balance. And all of a sudden, we saw that chicken wings, which were a big food service item, started to be prepared at home. Well, that wasn't just COVID. It also had a little thing to do with the good old air fryer, where all of a sudden people started to develop recipes and were searching for recipes to make chicken wings at home, and the air fryer came into focus. So there is always so much going on, from what is the availability in a marketplace, how are prices moving, what's happening between retail and food service, what are the latest trends in diets, what are the latest trends in meal appliances, and all of that just ties together, and it just really requires a curiosity all around. And I'll give you an example from the produce side of things. We saw all of a sudden this big spike in cucumber sales. Well, cucumber is a very mature category, and it just didn't make any sense. So starting to Google, I'm not a big social media person. It turns out hashtag cucumber salad by a young kid who creates all these oddball recipes with cucumber was causing a worldwide shortage of cucumbers, and saw a mature commodity grow by double digit in volume for several months running. And it just, all of a sudden, you have to understand why that is happening, but also see the opportunity and things like that for future trends.
I remember hearing a similar story about celery,
Yeah.
because there was a celebrity that decided to start juicing celery and making a celery drink, and that just like crashed the celery market.
Yep.
So I'm really curious now that you've brought up a sector outside of the meat industry. So you obviously work with all different food markets, and I'm wondering, do you see a lot of parallels, or are there key differences that you notice between, seafood or fruit and vegetables compared to the meat industry?
It's very interesting, because seafood, parallel to meat, has not been doing well. And if you think about why is that, seafood actually has had relatively flat prices. Now, the price of seafood is much higher than that of meat and poultry, which is our first clue that, people do start to look a little bit more at price and promotion going forward. But that doesn't explain it all, because if you just look at the beef category, for instance, beef was a monster in 2024, and we saw growth in ground beef, but we also saw growth in ribeyes, in sirloin, and all sorts of more premium cuts. So then you have to wonder, well, why do we see growth on both ends of the spectrum? Well, ground beef provided that ability for versatility, something that can stretch a little bit. It's a good price point. But then you saw growth in those premium items as well. And that had everything to do with more meals being prepared at home. So people started to entertain a little bit more at home. They started to bring the nice steakhouse dinner to the home. And that's where just dollars continue to flow in very bizarre ways, because that, of course, then impacts more asparagus or baking potatoes being purchased along with those premium steaks. And that's really how the world of retail works together. And sometimes it really helps to look at one category to uncover a little something about another category. For instance, if you look at value-added meat, so meat and poultry that has been marinated or seasoned, it's not had huge strength in the last couple of years. Well, then you look at the deli department, and you're seeing that prepared meats in the deli department, which would be your rotisserie chicken, your fried chicken, but also those dishes where you put the entire meal straight into the oven, they have been growing double digits. So it is not the lack of convenience, but it is that the convenience, the time-saving shortcuts have moved a little bit from the meat department to the deli department. So absolutely, it all works together.
Wow, truly fascinating how it's all connected.
I do have one question, and I've been doing quite a bit of work on meat waste, and I would like to know what are some of the advancements, or what is the retail business doing right now to either lower the meat waste at the retail level, or what are some of the agenda, if I can say that, that you know of.
Yeah, it is really an area of joint interest among the packer processors, the retailers, and the consumers. Food waste has always been, call it a social issue, right? You don't want to toss food with other people in the world being hungry. But in the current environment, there's actually a lot of people who are saying, I just simply cannot financially afford to waste food. But at the same time, we all know if you buy in bulk, you get a little bit of a price break. So what we saw at the beginning of the pandemic is a big investment in freezers at home. So if you look at the movement in units versus volume, America is buying meat and poultry in larger packages, reprocessing that at home and putting it into freezers. So that by extension already helps food waste, because now I can take out as much as I need. But on the retailer point of view, I've seen a big shift as well. So first of all, if you look at the packaging, there's a lot more case ready available now versus 10 years ago. And that, again, is actually something influenced by millennials, because they say, I think case ready meat is as good or better than meat cut and processed in the store. They don't have a huge interest in full service counters. So that case ready meat many times is in vacuum packages, which means that there is added shelf life. Now, the additional step I've started to see in the last year or two is retailers saying, yes, it'd be great for us as the retailer to have added shelf life, because that just makes our life easy. But shelf life belongs with the consumer. That's what a lot of the good retailers are saying right now, to make sure that the meat that is available in the case has as long of a shelf life once the consumer buys it, and really cut down on that waste in the home as well. So I think food waste is going to be a big area of focus in the entire chain, along with a reduction of packaging waste along with it. Sounds like you travel quite a bit, and certainly if you go to Europe, Australia, markets like that, you're seeing an enormous focus on reduction of package waste. They're very good about highlighting right on the package where it says 70% less plastic or now recyclable or whatever it is, but really making sure that the consumer is pulled into that effort of reducing food and package waste.
I would like to maybe shift the conversation a little bit. I want to make sure that we have time to ask you some questions, Anne-Marie, about as a woman who's just built this remarkable career in market research and food retail. I would love to know, what were some of the challenges that you had to face? What was it like overcoming them? You mentioned before we started recording today that you have children. Francisco and I both have children as well. And so there's a lot of times that we face challenges as working parents. And I would love for you to kind of share a little bit more about your personal journey and some of the things that you've faced and how you overcame them.
Sure. I have to say, I've been very fortunate in working in industries that are just amazingly welcoming and I really can't say I've had huge barriers in any which way, but certainly along the way, we've all had that weekend where it's a kid's birthday or an important sporting event and we are set to travel. And, the beauty of today's world is that there's a lot of technology. So yeah, sometimes I have to FaceTime to watch a soccer match or the one thing I do try to do is be home for the kids' birthdays. But certainly, in juggling multiple industries and juggling multiple clients, sometimes things stack up. And that's when the days can get quite long. And sometimes taking care of yourself and your family becomes a little bit of a secondary priority. And that's not always easy to figure out, especially when having your own business. But as I mentioned earlier, I definitely have learned that it's all about quality, more so than quantity during those times. And when I'm with the kids and when we're having dinner, that phone stays away. We have conversations. I always check in with them right after school and, just really try to be present in the moment as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. That engagement when you are home, I think is really, really critical. I used to travel a lot when my first daughter was very young and it was tough. Um, and so I can empathize with that being away from home and when your heart might be somewhere else. And I actually have three daughters, and so I'm always trying to tuck away these little nuggets to help them when they're older. And so just to piggyback off of that, do you have any particular advice that you would give to other women out there? Maybe not necessarily to carve out a career in the meat industry, but in general, some of these really competitive male dominated industries, and how can we help them come into their own and prove their worth as they are really trying to make their mark and find their place in the world?
I've always found that you have to have passion, and the minute you have passion for something, all of a sudden it moves from a job to something you truly, truly love, and that makes life so much easier. So apparently from a little kid onwards, I was always asking, well, why? And, clearly understanding the process behind something, understanding the drivers has always been of interest to me. And that turned into going to college to get a degree in marketing and research. And that turned into a career in trying to understand consumer behavior in food retailing or food in general. And to me, being passionate and loving what I do just sometimes makes those long hours a whole lot easier. Plus, to your point, when you're on stage and you're standing in front of 2,500 meat professionals, it helps to know what you're talking about, right? And certainly that passion rings through in whether I'm writing a report, writing an article, talking to you guys or being on stage. So that is really number one, is have a passion for what you do. And number two is, I think, oftentimes people are a little bit scared to specialize, because doesn't that make you pigeonholed into a certain area?
Of course, yep.
My answer to that would be no, because the more you know, the more confident you are. And I think confidence is often something that women struggle with. And certainly, I was in my 20s standing in front of that meat audience, and I was brand new, but I also knew that I could learn as much from them as they might know from me. And that's why I make it a point every single day to talk to somebody in the industries that I'm covering, so that I understand when there is a paper shortage and we might have product to sell, but we don't have labels, or there is a plastic shortage, so we might have product to sell, but we don't have packaging. So those are all the kinds of things that actually you mentioned earlier, with you have to understand the complete and total supply chain. And so specializing, being passionate, those are big things, and finding somebody you trust to be a mentor, simply to ask the tricks of the trade, to be introduced. I used to hate going to uh, networking events and being the only person to walk into the room, and oh my God, would not everybody look at me standing by myself? And these days it's like, you know what? I've learned that there's always those high bar tables, and we're all juggling with holding a glass and holding a plate and needing to have a place. So I just go to one of those. Eventually somebody else will pop up. We start talking, and it just all happens naturally. So sometimes it just takes time, and don't get frustrated. We all learn.
Perfect.
I
Well,
am definitely going to walk away from here more confidently passionate, I think. I also need to comment really quickly on your cheeseburger earrings. Those are super cute. I just noticed them. Is that what they are?
That is what they
They are
are. Yeah.
very cute.
Earlier, what are some of my hobbies? Crafting is one. I have made hundreds and hundreds of these. If you're at the annual meat conference, you'll see many people walking around with these. So I will make sure I have pins, I have earrings. I'll make sure to save you guys some.
That's awesome.
well, thank you so much. I think definitely a lot of data that are you going to RMC this year, or you typically go to the Reciprocal Conference?
Rotate in and out, but I definitely recommend everybody find me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting stuff on the meat industry. And like I said, I want to talk to everybody, whether you are a student or you're a veteran in the meat industry. I learn from all of you, and reach out. Love to hear from you.
Thank you very
Is there
much.
anything in particular? AMC is just a few short weeks away. Is there anything in particular that you're excited about this year?
So it's year 20, and
Of course, yes.
that meant the Meat Institute was reaching out to folks that have been before and asked, hey, what does the power of meat mean to you? And just listening to some of those videos and how they've shaped innovation, how they've shaped merchandising, knowledge of the industry is just amazing. But a lot of people talked about loving the consumer videos. So every year I go out and I do some 2025 folks about what they think about prices, how that's impacted whether they buy meat at retail or food service, or do they care about animal welfare. And they don't mean to be funny, but they are hilarious, because it's truly a consumer to our world. So every year too, I ask them different claims that we as the industry put on packages that are often meaningless to the consumer. And that might be things like air-chilled chicken, heritage pork, regenerative agriculture. And so every year we have us a good laugh at what people believe it is. So I'll give you one quote. This year I asked, if you are in the meat department, you're looking at a package of beef and it says regenerative on there, what does that mean? I had everything from, that sounds like if you cut the tail off a snake and it grows back, to that sounds like some zombie cow that can regrow its own leg. So in other words, regenerative is a beautiful thing, but we need to make sure that we speak in consumer language, and that brings back my passion for that consumer research, and it really becomes the 360 of why I love what I do.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Anne-Marie. I hope everyone finds you in your cheeseburger earrings at AMC this year and gets to congratulate you on this just amazing accomplishment.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for your time, and happy Friday, and enjoy your evening.
You do too.
Thank you.